Hey guys, how is it going? Welcome to the first stream of 2021. So today I'm gonna talk about some things that you guys have been asking me. So I collected some questions on Twitter from you guys. So the first question is by Chaosware and is asking how to translate music for video games, or more generally how to write music for video games, and ultimately some technical tips on creating loops and package for video game creators. So my experience with video games is limited. I did a few soundtracks. I did a Hacknet soundtrack. Now I'm doing the soundtrack for The Last Spell, which I just for the most part finished last week. So that's a very good news. The developers are very happy with the tracks. That makes me very happy as well. So I've made a few soundtracks for a few games, but I don't have the experience that some other composers will have. But from my experience, what helped me is playing the game. I used to have a screen with the game playing right on my side here, but I will write the track as I am watching someone else, like on YouTube or whatever, playing the game on my second screen here. And I think that's a great way to immerse yourself in the universe of the game, because you don't want to, go back and forth between playing the game and then writing your music. So having like a screen with the game playing on your side, like someone else playing the game, is very helpful, I think. And I took a lot of inspiration from past soundtracks, like obviously the Castlevania soundtrack is a big inspiration, but just going through those soundtracks and trying to find what makes them interesting, trying to find the patterns and what works is a good way to keep you in the mindset of creating a video game soundtrack. What is your mastering chain? So it changes all the time. I feel like I have cycles, For example, for the past year, it was all about putting a multi-band compressor and the limiter on the master chain and going crazy with a big compressor and some EQ and having a lot of different effects on the master chain and going crazy with that. But right now, I feel like I'm going minimal in a sense that I try to use as less effects as possible, and I try to have a mix that I like already without relying too much on the mastering chain. So basically my mastering chain right now is one limiter and that's it. But maybe that's too much. Maybe, like I said, it's through cycles. So maybe in 3-4 months, I will completely change my mind and I will start using as many effects as possible on the master chain, going crazy with saturation and stuff. I used to do that. I used to put like saturation on the master chain. I don't know if you realized how bad of an idea that is, but I used to do that. But I don't consider myself as a very good mastering engineer. Maybe don't take this advice. I don't know. Just try your own thing. I think that's what really matters. And, I had this epiphany a few months ago. I was watching a Mr. Bill masterclass on YouTube, and after that, I hated my life. Basically. But what's interesting is he said in one of this video that sound designing is basically taking the opposite approach to mixing and mastering. What he meant by that is like when you're creating music, when you're creating tracks and interesting sounds and interesting textures, you really have to stop thinking about like the best practices, because this is something you will find a lot. You will go through pro audio forums, you will go through YouTube videos, and everyone will tell you the same things, like use parallel compression, don't boost the EQ, don't do that. Those are best practices. But I found that if I stopped thinking about those things and tried things by myself, I was being more creative because I did not follow any rules. I did not follow any best practices. Everybody is saying, oh, you should do that. You should put parallel compression here. This is the only way to mix your drums. This is how you do it. But I don't agree with that. I think there are millions of ways to do one thing. And the more you try and go a different route, a different road, the more you realize that it doesn't actually matter so much, and you can achieve really great results and really great sounds by yourself with your own tools and your own ears. And that's like probably the best advice in regards to mixing, is to use your ears as much as possible. Do you use all plugins or some hardware units as well? Right now, I do use 100% plugins. I'm not saying it's the best way of doing it, but it's the most practical way for me, because I don't have to get a big room with like lots of equipment and a lot of cables lying around. Maybe one day I will go down that road, but right now I really like having the minimalistic approach of doing everything on the computer, I think it's it's a very futuristic approach in the sense that it's only gonna get better through time. I don't believe that hardware audio will disappear and start being irrelevant. That's not true. It will always be relevant in the future. But as software gets better and as audio research gets better, I believe at least that we will find much better quality software products in the future, and we're gonna be able to avoid using hardware machines entirely. But I don't know how far in the future this is gonna happen, because you may realize that playing through a guitar amp and recording guitar with your VST plugin is a different feeling as well. It's a different feeling having a cap right next to you in comparison to having headphones. We'll see how that evolves, but I believe that it will get better for sure. I have never used real amps. You don't have to. That's the beauty of modern audio, I guess. Something like 12 years ago when I first started, I used to play in a metalcore band, and I was using a 5150 and like a huge 4x12 cab, and it was lying around in my parents' house. Like it was sitting there in the living room, and my parents hated it. And then I sold it, and I think I bought like an Xbox with it or something. I sold my amp and I bought an Xbox. That tells you a lot about the person that I am. And then I sold the Xbox like 2 months after. I didn't play it so much because I had to move to a different city and I needed money as well. So I sold the Xbox in the end. But I played Dead Rising 1, which was a pretty amazing game, actually. Pretty amazing game. I played the last one, like Dead Rising 4, a few years ago, and I was so disappointed in comparison to how good the first one was. Anyway, that's off topic. So Julian Gruber is asking, when writing, is your focus more on the current part or the overall flow of the song? That's actually a very interesting question, because I'm not so sure myself where I stand. I think it's important to keep track of the atmosphere of a song. Like, at least from my experience, when I'm working on a track, I will try and loop the section I'm working on right now. So let's say I'm working on a 20-second section. I will loop that part and I will try and add details and like make the part groovy, interesting, and make it sound good. Then every now and then I will try and listen to the track from the beginning or from the section before and see how the sections before transition into this new section I'm writing at the moment. Sometimes I will realize, oh shit, actually it doesn't work at all. Like it's completely irrelevant to the way the track started before that. So I will try and maybe bring back some elements that were in the first section of the track back into the new section. That way it sort of ties the whole thing together. Or sometimes I will just scrap the new section entirely and try something different. And sometimes it actually works. You should not focus on one more than the other one. You should work on one section at a time and be able to really make it interesting, and like you have to listen to it a few times before you can actually make it better. But at the same time, you need to listen to the whole thing to make sure that it makes sense, to make sure that the atmosphere of the song is here, that you're basically not doing my first songs. Because when I listen to my very old songs, like I'm talking about songs from like 10, 12 years ago, a lot of times I'm like, oh shit, it's too bad that the track went that way, because this section here was so good. I wish I could listen to it again, you know? And that's a mistake I made a lot in the past. I was just like going crazy and writing completely random transitions and random sections that do not make sense with the whole flow of the track. Now I'm trying to get more of a overall feeling. Do you have an exact idea of what you're going to write before writing a track? Just go with the flow without any general idea. I would say that 90% of the time, I have no idea what is gonna happen when I start writing a track. I would just start with like a melody that I like, or maybe messing around with the keyboard until I find something that sounds good, is interesting, whatever, and then go from there and I record it. And then when it's on the screen, I try to either edit it in a way that makes it even more interesting, or try to add different elements around it or layered with it that I feel like I'm going somewhere. But I would say that most of the time when this is happening, it really takes a while before I feel like I got something. You know, it's like I would just mess around, maybe add a few more elements, maybe change the elements again and again. And I'm still in the like experimentation phase. I'm still researching, experimenting stuff. At some point, it's gonna click. I'm gonna be like, oh, okay, now it feels like there's some sort of atmosphere in the track. It feels like it's trying to say something. And then it just flows from there. And then everything falls into place more easily than in the beginning. But personally, I need to go through this part where I'm experimenting stuff, I'm trying out things, and I'm moving things around, I'm changing sounds, I'm going a bit crazy until it clicks and until I feel like I'm going somewhere. So I never have any specific idea of what the track is gonna sound like before I start working on it. I mean, sometimes I just I don't know, I lie around in my bed, and I close my eyes and I can think about music, but when I'm sitting down in front of my home studio, it doesn't happen that way. It's not like I have crazy melodies and crazy drums happening in my head and I'm trying to replicate it on the screen. It's more like I have to do something, I have to create a basis before everything starts going into flow state or whatever. The only advice that you should take from this is just do it. Just sit and do something and you will see that it's gonna happen. At some point, you will start writing the track. I mean, the track will start writing itself, almost. What do you think about teenage engineering instruments? Have you ever tried them? I've never tried them, although I would love to. Have you ever used live coding techniques and tools in your songs? I have not used any live coding techniques in my songs, though I would also love to, but it's not something I've been experimenting with or researching so much, because I'm happy with the tools that I'm using right now, and I feel like one day it will happen. I feel like it's something that I will mess around with at some point in my life. I feel like I have already so many opportunities that I don't need to go even more crazy. Although I've messed around with Max for Live. Max for Live is basically a programming language that's sort of built on top of Ableton Live. Like, you have to basically use blocks to connect them to each other, and then you start creating a program that generates sound, and then you can go and be like, okay, I have my sine wave, I have like my filter here, let's connect them together. Then I have an oscillator, so let's connect it to the filter or whatever, and you can go crazy with that. So I've messed around with it, but I have not created any serious, I would say, sound with it. I'm going to the next question on Twitter from Binary State. The tweet is pretty long, but it's basically asking to hear my approach regarding reverb and delay sense and how to create abstract sounds using like reverb and delay and that sort of things. So my advice regarding reverb and delay is going to be pretty simple, but it's something that has been pretty successful with me in the past. Sometimes, I have like those crazy drums and guitar, and they really need to hit hard. They really need to be precise, be in the foreground, and they really need to hit all the time. And sometimes I have those soundscapes that are more in the background, and it feels like they're here, you can hear them, and they're pretty precise, but it's almost as if they're being hit by the drums in the foreground. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's the way I picture it. So the soundscapes in the background, in order for them to be in the background, I use most of the time reverb and delay, because then it creates this like wall of sound that seems thick, even though it's only a few notes on a synthesizer. And that's the magic, I think, of delay and reverb, is with a few notes, with very simple sounds, you can create an impression of space and you can create like a wall of sound. And that's the way I personally use reverb and delay. Recently, I started working more with resampling techniques. What that means is you have a sound, you apply reverb to it, a huge amount of reverb, and then you record that sound, and then basically you use it as a sample that you can cut, and then you create like this very short burst of reverb. But resampling reverb is also a very interesting tip. Another question I got was about guitar tones. So again, I don't feel like I'm an expert about guitar. I can play a few riffs, but I'm not a very good guitar expert. But what has been working for me quite successfully is using plugins like Biosophics, or more recently the neural DSP plugins, and they already have like a bunch of presets that are pretty good, and you just need to go through the preset. Maybe you change a few things depending on your ear and what you like, and I think it's enough to get like a very satisfying and good guitar sound. You don't need to go like the extra step of having hardware stuff, and except if you're Tosin Abazi or whatever and you need like a crazy solid tone and something that's like I would say, avant-garde or like specifically incredible, like Pliny are doing, you know. These guys, I understand that they need to go the extra mile and having like a very distinctive and very special guitar sound. For my own tracks, I don't go that far, I would say. I try to have like a minimal approach to it and use one plugin, a preset, one EQ. I think that's like the part that makes it work with the other elements is using an EQ. So because I have a lot of synthesizers going on and a lot of electronic drums going on at the same time, because I create metal in an electronic music way, my mixes are more treble rich than a typical metal band. So what that means is when there is a guitar can have a lot of treble, but my synthesizers and my electronic drums do also have a lot of treble. So what I'm doing with the EQ is very simple. I'm basically cutting the treble. Not all of them, and I try to be very careful with the amount of stuff I'm cutting from the guitars, but most of the time I cut a little bit of treble to give space to the synthesizers and to let them create the story. I think that's very important to the way that my music sound. You know, it wouldn't sound the same way without this. In my tracks, basically the synthesizers and the drums are driving the music, not the guitar. It's mostly those two other things that are doing it. Question for you: have you ever wanted to get a hardware synth? I have one. So I have this Korg Minilog. Think about it. 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. But it's basically a full analog synthesizer that was pretty cheap at the time. Cheap in terms of price, obviously. I think now there's a new version of it. It's basically the same one, but they added a bunch of stuff and it looks better and it sounds better. The new one is even more amazing, but back in the day, this one was also pretty good. I don't use it much these days, but there are some periods in my life where I've used it a lot more, and especially in the live shows, I used it quite a lot. I basically had a MIDI keyboard like this one, the synthesizer keyboard, my guitar, and then my laptop, and then like a bunch of audio interface stuff and wireless headphone stuff. I used the synth in a very interesting way. I had my tracks, I had like my bass, my drums, my synths playing, and I had also some MIDI tracks sending some data to the synth. So a lot of time I would manipulate the synth while it was being fed with the MIDI tracks of the actual music. So that was a cool way to, you know, modulate the sound of the music in a live way, because it's happening right here in the analog synthesizer, and still have like the precision of playing MIDI track. And yeah, it's very, very, very cool synth. I recommend it if you're into analog synthesizer and you want to get one. It's a really good one for like a very reasonable price. So on mine, sadly, something terrible happened. I think it was when I first got it, like 4 years ago or 5 years. I can't remember the exact date, but let's say I got it 4 years ago. Like the month after I get it, we go on tour. I bring it with me, and I don't know exactly how it happened, but maybe it has something to do with my drummer, Jean Ferry, carrying his kick drum and then putting it on top of a bunch of bags. I don't remember exactly, but basically you can see, yeah, basically it's a little bit bent. So it's okay, it's not so bad, but it's still a bit annoying. Especially annoying it happened like a month after I got it. That was not cool, but yeah, still works. You can see it's bent. It only happened once, you know. I did a lot of shows with this one and it didn't happen again, so I guess that was just bad luck. Hi from Glasgow, Remy. I've seen your live show a few times over the years and wondered what style of live shows you would do in the future. Would you still tour with a live drummer if you have had some fantastic drummers? I love that aspect of the shows. Thank you very much, man. Really appreciate the kind words. So to reply to your question, honestly, it's not something I've been thinking about a lot these days. Obviously, because of COVID, it's very hard to play shows right now, so it's hard to project yourself into doing that. I think if I had to reply to you right now, I would probably keep the same formula, working with a drummer and having my own setup with guitar, synthesizers, and having like a cool light show. I think that works pretty well, and start building on top of it by improving it. Maybe investing in the light show, maybe bringing more synthesizers on stage, for example. That would be, of course, a very interesting way to improve the live show. But it's, like I said, it's hard to really project myself right now into that scenario, because obviously we cannot play shows, and I've started focusing a lot more on actually creating music, like doing the live stream right now is something that I want to start doing more frequently as well. So I have a lot of different projects right now and amazing projects, and I feel like trying to find ways to improve a live show right now is a bit too much for me because I'm not in the mindset to think about that. Hopefully, let's cross fingers. I really, really hope that live shows will come back to the world, because the world needs music, the world needs live music especially, and I miss live shows. I miss going to live shows. I miss playing live shows. I miss all of it. I miss festivals. It's a bit sad. It's like we live in a very sad time, especially for culture. But friends, let's cross fingers. Let's hope it gets better soon in the future. Music is really unique. Did you manage to describe a genre in which you are working on from the very beginning? How did you find a definition of synth-driven progressive metal? It's a difficult question, but honestly, the best advice I can give you is to not think about it. I'm gonna talk about when I first started making this kind of music, like specifically making the algorithm, like metal with electronic elements. I did not think about how it's called. You know what I mean? I started experimenting with stuff, and for me it was experimental. That's the way I described it in the beginning. I used to put on my MySpace profile, it was just saying experimental metal or whatever. And I used to send my music to like blogs. Back in the day, there were like music blogs where you could download albums on Mega Upload or things like that, and I used to send my albums for free. Like I would upload them on Mega Upload myself and send them to the blogs, being like, hey man, I got this algorithm album, can you upload it on your piracy music website? I would basically do the job of what the Russians are doing right now, these days with my own music. But anyway, my point is you should not think about how your music is called. You should think about how your music sounds, I guess. Do you plan to do Book Infinity live? Nope. I don't plan on playing Book Infinity live. What was it like touring with Voyager back in 2014? Was it in 2014? Voyager was like in 2017. It was great. It was amazing, 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 amazing people. Full of happiness, full of jokes, and I don't know how I can describe them, but they are very, 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 very nice people, and we had a really great time. So for those that don't know, Voyager is an Australian band, and they invited us to do a small Australian tour. I think we played like 5 shows or 6 shows, something like that. And these guys are so nice. They're really, really nice. And it was especially, I would say, hard tour, because touring in Australia is a bit of a nightmare in the sense that you do all your travels by plane. So it's not like in Europe where you basically hire a van or a big car or whatever, and then you travel by car from Paris to Brussels, from Brussels to Berlin or whatever. In Australia, you have to take a plane to go from Sydney to Melbourne, and then Melbourne to Brisbane or whatever. So you have to take planes all the time. And when you have a big backline, when you have guitars, when you have amps, when you have drum kit, it starts being a nightmare, because being in airports with so much equipment is like not a good thing. It's very annoying, and you have to wake up super early in the morning to catch the cab to go to the airport. So it's pretty difficult. But my point is, touring with Voyager in these conditions was of course pretty hard, but Voyager are so nice that it made us forget about the negative aspects of the tour, and we had such a good time because these guys were so happy and so funny, and so very good experience. I think the algorithm is beyond a music style, because for me it's a great combination of all these things I love. Computers, metal, gen, synth, drums. So oh my god, there's I have a window here. So I live in like a big complex of different apartments, and a lot of people live here. There's someone that has a cat, black cat, and he always come into my apartment, and he always like meow at my door, so he wants to go in. And now he's at the window trying to get my attention so I can let him in. But I'm not gonna do that because, okay, maybe I can. Let me bring the cat if I can. Okay, that's the cat. I don't know what he's trying to do. I think he's looking for food. You know what? It's not a good thing to have it. Or maybe he can stay here actually. Yeah. Come here.
Nope.
No, friends, he wants to go back to his owners, I think, so I'm gonna let him go. What's his name? His name is Tico, because he has a small medal here with the name of his owners and like the phone number, and there's also his name, which is Tico. Cat is still here, the window. I don't know what to do about this. Maybe he's just watching the stream, the real live stream. Will not be able to hear the music, sadly, but he's enjoying himself. That's the best thing. The Algozoid is the best music in the world. I would not say it's the best. I mean, for me, at least. It's the best I can do. That's something I can say. But thank you very much for the kind words, obviously. Thank you very much. All right. I think I went through all the questions on Twitter, so